Okay, so now I've set up my jig for doing some routing. What we want to do is cut some dados, which are the grooves that are going to run here and hold the pegboard. So that's 5mm MDF on the pegboard. So what I need to do is cut a 5mm groove straight down this board. Now I'm not going to put it quite in the middle. I've measured off the old pegboard, it's about 2 centimeters sitting off the wall. So this is 46 millimeters across here. So I'm going to take it about 20 mils. It doesn't have to be exact, as long as all of the runners have the same gap, then the pegboard will fit in nice and square. In order to achieve that, I need to use my router to cut straight through. Got a 5mm bit set in there, straight bit going there, just got the trim base on, should work well. Now, a few things here that I've done that I've picked up watching my channels, and that is firstly, doing a jig for a stop block. Ideally, this would be done on a routed table, and it would be done very, very quickly and very, very easily. I am looking at making a routed table. I actually purchased one that was rubbish. I'll tell you about that later, because the next big project I think will be to make my own routed table. But for the moment, I've set up this apparatus. I've got 2 of these slats in order to create a bit of a slot here. I've got my stop block in, and this is just a test piece. So always run a test, particularly when you're using jerry rigs, because that way you know when you work on your actual material, it's going to come out fine. So I put this down. First thing I need to do is set up the router. So as I said, 5mm straight bit in there, which will cut the perfect size groove for that. Now, generally speaking, with your router bits, you don't want to cut deeper than half the width of the router bit, or you risk snapping the damn thing. So I've only got this set at 2.5mm deep at the moment. Very easy to adjust. This is my Makita cordless 18-volt router. Very simple operation. I'm not going to go too much into how to use them. I'm sure there are people who actually know what they're doing to explain it a lot better. I do like it because it comes with also the suction facility, which I can hook the back up to. Goes in like that. And it's amazing what you get just by doing test runs. So this here is a little piece of plastic that I've had to put down over the end of the board, because I found that when I was doing my test run, the grooves in the Ryobi hose were actually catching on the edge and giving me a little bit of jittering. So piece of plastic down there, and that should run nice and smooth. I've set this up like so. 2 slats. We're obviously going to be routing in this direction, and the way that I'm going to do it is by having repeatable cuts with this jig. Cheated, already done one. That is about 2 centimeters. How did we get it there? Take a straight edge, measured up all the way across the board, and I knew I wanted it 2 centimeters off, but keep in mind you've got a 5mm router bit, so you actually have to take it 22.5 millimeters, roll that back to 22.5, make a mark, lock that up, and then I can transfer that measurement from my blade to the guide using the straight edge. Very, very nice. This means now that I don't have to worry about measuring any of the other boards, because every time I put a board down in there, I will have the exact same distance by applying pressure along the guide like so. So that's what we end up with. You can even see, if you look really closely, the jitters I mentioned that I got from the hose. But the good news is that was only a test piece. So now we can cut a shorter version for the actual bit of wood that I want. Now, I'm going to be careful here, because one of these is my cut edge from earlier where I ripped it, and the other one is the factory edge. I don't really intend on finishing this at all. I mean, it's only going to be in the workshop, doesn't need any protection, and doesn't need to look pretty. But I do have to make sure that each time I put my wood in, that I'm cutting the same 22.5 mils from the same edge, because otherwise I'll end up with cut edges showing, or I'll end up with the face edge showing. So I'm going to mark little X's on all of these before I get going, so that I make sure the cuts are all the same. Okay, well that was actually much easier than I thought it was going to be. So with the longboard, obviously I had the clamp at this end and I couldn't push the router all the way through to complete the cut. All I actually needed to do was just simply move the clamp to the other end, so that's still held in quite nicely. Now, if I haven't said so already, get a workshop vac. The first bit of routing I did without one was just horrendous. It took so long to clean up afterwards because of all the store dust. This thing is an absolute time saver. It just makes it so much easier to see what you're cutting as well. The visibility on the Makita router is actually really, really good. Nice 2 lights in there, but with this here, it just sucks away all the dust and you can really keep up what you're doing. You might have noticed my very first handmade sign, which displays my 5-year-old handwriting up there, which I did freehand with the router. Vacuum probably would have made it that little bit neater. All right, let's finish off this long cut. And of course, removing one clamp isn't always enough because now I've got that other final clamp bar in my way. We'll sort that out. Live and learn. Okay, trap for young players. You can see here that router bit got really hard to use. So I'm about 4 or 5 cuts in now, and suddenly it just wasn't cutting through very effectively. And so I stopped the router to see what was going on, because if you ever feel like resistance when you're pushing the router through, generally there's something wrong. You've either hit a knot or this has happened. So I haven't obviously tightened my router bit anywhere near as much as I should have. Perhaps because last time I tightened it up so much, it actually took me about 10 or 15 minutes to get the damn thing out again. And this particular straight bit I've noticed is a slippy one. It doesn't seem to want to stay in the collet perfectly well. So you can see exactly what happened there. We were cutting 2.5, 2.5, then suddenly it's gotten itself loose and it started to go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then that's where I felt that there was a big problem, and so I've stopped the router. Now, fortunately for the workpiece, I may not have gone all the way through, and as no one's ever going to see that, it may be just that I can adjust the height correctly. I needed to go deeper anyway, just not quite that deep, and power on through. Otherwise, if you remember that extra longboard I cut, well, it may well come in useful. So, look, got to be careful with routers. They are a fairly high-powered tool. I have sort of seen videos of router bits breaking and flying off, so just like anything, if it feels like it's not quite right, just stop, back off and see what the problem is. And what I'm learning here is after every couple of cuts, it's probably best to go back and check the strength, I suppose, of that collet, just to make sure it hasn't managed to work loose and come down and start to become, well, dangerous and also damage your workpiece, which will lead to more time cutting. All right, little safety lesson there. Once that was all set up and running, it actually went pretty quickly. I got into the habit of every time I started a new cut, just to check the blade. I mean, you can't see any of the shank on here, and the really good thing about the safety feature on the Makita cordless router is that when you press the safety button before you can turn it on and turn it off, it turns on these 2 little LEDs, and you can see straight away if there's any silver showing in the shank, then your bit has slipped. I also think, with my experience growing with the routers very slowly, that I'm getting better at knowing how to tighten. Well, I said I had a trouble where I over-tightened the bit, and obviously today I under-tightened it a little bit. But now it's in there, and that went really nicely. I did 3 passes, and that probably 8 to 9 mil. Again, that doesn't really matter as long as they're all nice and even. I did end up chucking out the bit that I completely buggered, but no wood around here goes to waste. I'm sure that will be handy somewhere down the line. And that's it. So I've got 6 bits at the moment. Sides, top and bottom, and the middles. Obviously, to make those middles, I need to cut these 2 in half. However, before we do that, I'm going to round off the edges, so switch out the router bit in here to a round over bit, and then we'll make it nice and smooth. Then we can cut those straight in half, and we can think about maybe trying to use a circular saw to miter the edges of the box, start gluing it together. After spending about 10 or 15 minutes buggering around with jigs, trying to find a way that I could bring the router to these fairly small pieces of wood and get a nice round over on the edge, I decided that it's not going to happen easily, so I spent 2 minutes turning my handheld router into a router table, minus the table. Obviously, from a safety perspective, this probably isn't the best idea, and luckily no one's going to watch these videos, so I won't have a million people on the internet telling me what an idiot I am. I have shored this all up as well as I can. It's all fairly sturdy. Don't even really care that's not at 90 degrees. The important thing is it's not going to move as I feed the wood through. I have managed to run a test piece, and it told me two things. That the round over bit is set at the correct height. That took a little bit of manipulating, but actually in this setup, changing the height was really easy. You might have noticed I switched to a plunge base. Now it's actually locked in position. I'm not using it as a plunge base. Two reasons. Firstly, the round over bit that I have here doesn't fit through the trim base. And secondly, it gives me a nice big area here on which to slide the wood through. I can keep my fingers safely away. So eventually we'll have a router table, but it is another great feature of the Makita cordless router that you can switch off. I've got 3 different bases I use for it, and the plunge is probably my favorite, gives me the most control. So last thing I learned from my test piece is to make sure that you actually round over the correct edge. I don't want that edge. So that bit's going to be against the wall, this bit's going to be showing, and that's the outside bit. So we're going to run it through that way. So when it's all set up, this will be our nice rounded over bit. The bottom inside edge of the box, I'll just probably round that over with sandpaper. I don't really need that to be quite as pretty. In fact, you might be asking why with a pegboard am I bothered to do this decoration at all? Well, quite simply, I'm doing it for the experience. I'm really new at routing, as you can probably be told by this setup. And so I'm just trying to practice as many different techniques as I can in order to build up my skill level, so when I do finally have a router table, I'll be able to do some more awesome things. Okay, well that's all my routing done with no mishaps, safety or otherwise. I think I managed to cut all of the correct edges on my 6 bits. This is with the vacuum on. I mean, check out that sawdust. I mean, really, really good. Probably should be wearing dust mask even with the vacuum, I think, just because it is creating heaps and heaps of sawdust. But it's jolly good fun, really satisfying to be able to sort of mould the wood in this way. I know, complete newbie excitement, but that's all right. Got those up. Next bit will be to cut the long ones in half because, as I said, that's not going to be long enough to do all the way across. So rather than have this bit tacked on the end like that, I'm going to cut this in half, and that way 2 things will happen. I'll have the nice even joint in the middle, and secondly, the way I intend to glue these up with the miter, I am going to try the miter, will be much easier with 2 shorter bits of wood, rather than having the one long bit of wood or one giant frame. So making progress, no bullshit time. This is the end of my 2nd afternoon working on this project. I reckon that someone who knew what they were doing would probably have had it knocked over in about 2 hours. I reckon that I'm up to about 6 so far. Granted, there is some filming time involved in that. Generally doing things in one take, as you'll notice my camera skills are even worse than my woodwork skills. But I'm having really good fun, which is why I started to do this, and it's really satisfying to see a project start to take shape.